Okay, I'd like to call to order the Bedford Township Planning Commission meeting, October 26, 2022. It is 7 p.m. If we could all stand, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Rector, in the absence of Tom Corvette, can you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Helm.
Here.
Mr. Fritz.
Here.
Mr. Swank.
Here.
Mr. Steiner.
Aye.
Mr. Lampkowski is unexcused. Mr. Corvette is excused. And Mr. Mahoney.
Here.
All present.
Okay, thank you. Next item, approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda is submitted. Support.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes unanimously. Okay, going on to approval of the minutes from October 12, 2022.
Motion to approve the minutes of October 12th, 2022 is submitted.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion passes unanimously. On to item 6, public comment. Limited to 3 minutes. Anybody who'd like to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 7, new business. Item A, request for a sign waiver for Secor Stearns Investment, LLC, Marvin Pataya, Goodwill and Donation Center, Keith Chapman, in a C3 General Commercial Zoning District, multi-unit building on parcel number 5802-031-006-10, otherwise known as 7375 Secor Road, Lambertville, Michigan 48144. Ms. Rector.
Yes, again, the applicant is Goodwill Industries, and the sign company is Fast Signs. Contact is Keith Chapman, and location is 7375 Secor Road, parcel 5802-031-006-10, C3 General Commercial. The applicant is seeking a sign waiver to install 2 wall signs located on a portion of the former Foodtown location, which has been converted into a multi-unit building. The parcel is zoned C3 General Commercial. As information to the Planning Department, Goodwill's business is divided into 2 sections, one for donations and one for items for sale. Thus, there are 2 proposed sections of the lease structure. The applicant's request for 2 wall signs. However, as confirmed by the building official, Dennis Kohler, the leased portion is not up to building code as 2 units. Thus, should the units ever be leased individually, a firewall and any other building code requirements would be required. Per section 419.22(7)(b), one sign identifying the name of the business for all other zoning districts may be attached to the wall of the building, 2.5 feet in height and 50 square feet in area, or 80% of the width of the unit, whichever is less, is permitted. Due to the width of the unit, the location is permitted 50 square feet in area. The first proposed wall sign proposes 47.5 square feet of signage and 2.5 feet in height and is to be attached to the existing permanent parapet wall. Per section 419.22(1)(v), permanent non-freestanding signs shall be wall signs attached to a wall of a building such that no part of the sign shall be located higher than the lowest part of the roof attached to the wall of the building where the sign is located. Sign waivers were granted for the Dollar Tree on 7/27/2016 and for Liquor Cabinet on 4/12/2017. The second proposed wall sign measures 21.67 square feet and 1 2/3 feet in height, with a logo measuring 5 square feet and 2.5 feet in height. The applicant has indicated the second wall sign will be used to advertise for the donation drop-off located next to the main storefront. Please note the second sign is for this use only. Should use change, only one sign would be permitted, as by building code there is only 1 unit. Thus, these requests requiring a waiver to allow the placement of the first sign to be located above the lowest point of the roof line due to the roof design, and to allow for a second wall sign for this specific use. If the request is considered, the following waivers are required. Permit the placement of the sign above the lowest point of the roof line due to the roof design. Permit a second wall sign for the Goodwill/Donation Center, as the leased area is only 1 unit. The following shall be considered in any conclusion in any motion. A sign and electrical permit shall be obtained from Bedford Township. The applicant shall continue to work with the township to ensure placement of the sign meets all the requirements of this waiver, and should there be a change in the use, the second wall sign shall be removed.
Okay, thank you. Is there a representative for the applicant? You want to come up to the podium over here? And state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is J.R. Hoppinjans. I'm the owner of Fast Signs. We're located at 1339 North Telegraph Road in Monroe, Michigan.
Can you make sure the microphone's close? Thanks.
Is
Ms.
this on? Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted, the applicants were advised we would be one member short. However, tonight we are two, so they would have the right to defer to the next meeting.
Do you wish to defer?
We do not wish to defer.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there anything you want to add to Ms. Rector's comments?
No, we just want to answer any questions about that although it is one unit, there really are two separate business functions going on, and we just, if that needs further clarification, I can help with that.
Does anybody have any questions?
Mr. Mahoney?
Mr. Steiner?
Since the way you described it, obviously one says sales, the other says donation side, but you just mentioned operating sort of like two separate business units. Give a little background to what you mean when you say it, because obviously it's one business, but what you're actually stating there.
Sure. The Goodwill store is a retail operation where they take items that are donated not only from that location but from a number of locations, resell them. They utilize that money for social service programming. They help disabled and mentally challenged folks integrate into the workforce and all kinds of other great things. The donation center is obviously to take the donations, to prepare them for the locations. Not all donations that are accepted at that center would be at that retail store. They have a sophisticated logistics system where all books go to one location. They know how many couches are at one location. They go to certain places. So it is kind of, it is one business, two different operations. But the importance of the signage is so the public is clear as to which operation they're going into and what happens there.
So basically, the donation side, you might as well call it a non-transactional type operation. It's more of a like you said, a logistics operation of sorting and segregating, and obviously you must ship back out of there if it's something that you don't want to have at that location.
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay.
It's almost like there's two different buildings, and I don't see it being an encumbrance or looking like clutter. It looks like it belongs there. It's part of the business. It's like two separate buildings.
We agree, and I think there's a technical distinction there with the firewall, and I believe that Donation Center does not have its own separate restroom facility, so therefore we were not able to consider it one leased unit.
I see. Mr. Fritz?
Or two leased units.
It's a good idea, letting people know where to go for the traffic flow. And, I just think it's common sense that you want people to know where they need to go.
Any other questions? Is there a motion on the floor? We're voting, or at least if there is a motion, that we're just approving a second sign on this building, correct?
The first sign has to be approved and reviewed for above the roof line for the Goodwill sign for that portion of the building. And then the second one is for the location of the drop-off for donations.
So we need two separate.
To be two separate motions, one for the first sign of the Goodwill and one if your desire is to allow for a second wall sign.
Anyone care to make a motion?
Mr. Mahoney, I'll go ahead and I'm going to make the motion to approve the first portion, which is also parcel number 5802-031-006-10 at 7375 Secor Road, Lambertville, Michigan, 48144. The placement of the sign above the lowest point of the roof line due to the roof design That is a waiver that I'm saying that we should approve based on the fact that it's common with the businesses next door that have also had a similar waiver for their signage as well along that property, i.e. liquor cabinet, et cetera.
Support.
Okay, Mr. Shank supports. Ms. Rector, can you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Steiner.
Aye.
Mr. Swank.
Aye.
Mr. Helm.
Aye.
Mr. Fritz.
Aye.
Mr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Well, now we got
Number
second
two.
part.
Oh,
Part two.
Part 2, second sign on this, on the adjacent building. Same building.
I'll go ahead. It's a little redundant, but again, parcel number 5802-031-006-10, 7375 Secor Road, Lambertville, Michigan, 48144. This motion is to approve the second wall sign for the Goodwill Donation Center only, and it's the only leased area that it's one unit. It's not a separate leasing unit. The approval is subject to the sign and electrical permit to be obtained from Bedford Township. The applicant shall continue to work with the township to ensure the placement of the sign meets all the requirements of the waiver. And should there be a change in the use, the second sign, wall sign, must be removed from that portion of the facility.
There's support for the motion.
Support.
Mr. Shank seconds. Ms. Rector, can you call the roll?
Mr. Steiner.
Aye.
Mr. Swank.
Aye.
Mr. Fritz.
Aye.
Mr. Helm.
Aye.
Mr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Thank you now.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Okay, item B, request for a sign waiver for Dr. Tricia Amborski, Enlightened Family Chiropractic, for the Body, Mind, and Soul Studio, Susan Johnson, LMT, in an R2 LVOD, Abbey Lambertville Overlay District, single-family residential zoning district within the Lambertville Village Overlay District, in a multi-unit building on parcel number 5802-020-102-05, otherwise known as 8400 Secourt Road, Lambertville, Michigan, 48144. Ms. Rector.
Again, the applicant is Susan Johnson, LMT, the Body, Mind, and Soul Studio. Location is 8400 Secourt Road. Company sign is Graphic Signs. Owner is Dr. Tricia Ambrowski for Enlightened Family Chiropractic, 5802-020-102-05, and again, single-family residential within the Lambertville Village Overlay District. The applicant is seeking to install a monument sign in the front of the new unit located at 8400 Secourt Road, where the existing pole monument sign was granted a 7-year grace period, which has since lapsed, and there have been no further changes to the sign, nor has the sign been removed or brought into compliance. The property is zoned R2B LVOD, single-family residential, and is located within the Lambertville Village Overlay District. The ordinance permits one monument sign up to 40 square feet in area and 4 feet in height in the Lambertville Overlay District. The proposed sign is approximately 16.8 square feet of signage and an overall height of 5 feet. While the overlay district allows for design and material that is compatible with the intent of the character of the overlay, and small signs with distinctive shapes, unique textures, symbols, and materials that promote creativity that shall be encouraged. The overlay still requires that all signs be subject to the requirements of Section 400-1922 and meet the township sign regulations unless otherwise outlined herein. Per Section 400-1922, freestanding monument sign states, all freestanding signs shall not exceed the maximum height and surface area specified in this section for the use, zoning district, and/or type of sign specified. All permanent freestanding signs shall be monument signs. The maximum surface area of a permanent freestanding sign shall apply to the surface advertising space, and there shall be allowed an additional square footage of decorative structure not to exceed the maximum square footage allowed for the sign, or 50 square feet, whichever is less. A monument sign shall be a sign where, 1, the bottom of the sign above ground is an extension of the underground foundation, and a decorative structure on the top of the foundation that runs at least the entire width of the widest part of the sign. 2, the bottom of the sign above ground is no less wide than any part of the sign above the ground. And 3, the decorative structure on top of the foundation above ground is made of stone, brick, or similar rock, or a similar nature decorative material or made of similar looking man-made material. Thus, the applicant's request to permit the unique monument sign design and proposed location within the Village Overlay District and a 1-foot height waiver as submitted. The applicant has indicated the proposed sign will be installed in front of the leased unit as proposed, and the request is due to no clear location for a wall sign, nor the desire to utilize and cover the window with the signage as it was previously utilized. Should the request be considered, the following waivers are required: a 1-foot height waiver, and to permit a unique wood pole sign, standing monument sign where no wall sign is being proposed. The following shall be considered for any inclusion in any motion to approve. All required permits shall be obtained from Bedford Township. Should there be a change in use, the unique wood pole sign monument sign shall be removed, and the applicant shall continue to maintain the entire perimeter landscape of the area base no less 2 feet wide, growing and in a healthy condition. I just wanted to point out that previously, if you look at the larger view of the structure photo that was included in your packet, you will see that the previous tenant utilized the window space. Her intent would be to like to put the structure in front of the window within the, I think it's like a mulched area. But the ordinance for the overlay allows for a unique looking sign. However, it still requires some type of base and foundation by ordinance, referring back to the section of 419.22. So I just wanted to clarify that it does allow for the unique looking signs. However, it still requires a base. And in this intent, her intent is to just put it on the 2 wood posts.
Okay, just to clarify, she just can't bury the posts in the ground. Is that what you're saying?
That doesn't have a base at all on the sign. It's just the wood sign with the 2 posts. There's no base at all. And that's what her intent is, to provide that as the signage, where in ordinance it says that's required to have some type of base. So that's why she's asking for the waiver of the unique sign to not include a base on the monument.
Okay.
So if I'm understanding correctly, then what you're saying, this is not going to be a monument sign, it's going to be more of a pole sign.
Correct. As what she has proposed in the picture.
You guys want to state your name and address for the record?
Gary Harrell, 3443 Quail Hollow Drive, Lambertville. Yes, and to better understand that, in order to, it would be virtually impossible to put any type of a foundation where this sign is located, because it is virtually right next to the building foundation. So, again, the reasoning, the original sign that was there before she had moved in, they put lettering on the glass. The owner of the building, and again, I can't take responsibility for it because I didn't have anything to do with it, but it's my understanding that when they did remove the lettering, it damaged the windows, and they had to replace the window. And with that being said, he is not allowing any tenants to put graphics moving forward on the windows. So that's kind of one of the reasons we're requesting this. And then the other is, obviously there is a little bit of room if you're looking at the picture to the left, but there's a pole, right in front of that, so that becomes obstructive as well. So that's the reasoning, and obviously, again, if we're going to be doing, a type of a pole sign, she obviously is leasing, so she would want to have the flexibility. If she did want to move to a different location, she would have the ability to take her sign with her. And if we have to put concrete into the post, we certainly can. It would be absolutely overkill, but if that's a requirement that you think needs to happen, we can do that. I don't, the sign is not large enough. There's not enough wind load that's going to be, we would be 42 inches down into the ground, and it's not going to go anywhere.
I don't think mailboxes are recommended to be put in concrete.
Yeah,
It wouldn't make sense, I don't think. Anybody have a comment?
Mr. Mahoney,
Mr. Steiner.
you want to first also advise
Yes.
about 2 members short?
2 members short tonight.
Yep,
Should I
that's
just
fine.
proceed?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, now I'll comment.
By all means.
So a quick question. I almost missed it, even though Jody has writing on this. I almost missed the current sign that you pointed to, because it blends in almost. And is that sign coming down, that small sign? It looks like it's on pipe or whatever.
I don't believe they're utilizing it. They had the old barbershop pole sign that was there, and I don't think they're utilizing it. Enlighten Chiropractic has a wall sign. If you look at the other larger picture that we supplied, they just have a wall sign, and they are not on that pole sign as well. I don't believe they're utilizing it, and I think that's why she's inquiring about having her own sign
Right.
instead of the unique pole sign that's out front.
Because, am I understanding, though, that it would actually have to come down because it doesn't meet the ordinance, so that sign would have to be
Correct, and I
removed.
think that's why there have been no changes, and the other
Right.
tenant put the window clean up or the window signage because of the fact that if they utilized that pole sign, they would have had to bring it in compliance because of the 7 years, and I believe that that's not the intent of the property owner at this time.
And one of the things that I'm going to mention in today's type of society, honestly, I'd rather have that window clear as can be and not have a bunch of graphics on it so you can see who's coming and going. To me, that's a safety advantage of not putting graphics back up on that window. The sign itself, the design, it looks very nice. Again, I know you said concrete's probably a little overkill. I mean, it's a preference, and you're the sign guy. I don't know.
Yeah, like I said, I think
Does
it would be.
Would it help the sign if she did put maybe concrete with a sleeve? So if she decides she wants to move somewhere else, she could easily get that sign out and move, or does it make a difference?
I think the only disadvantage to that is moving forward, if someone else, whether they want to put a sign in or not, that they're going to be locked in, one, to that, or two, if they don't want to do anything with it. Now, they're using that as landscaping. It's got mulch and some, I believe, some landscaping, some sort there. So now we're, if we're putting concrete, nothing's going to grow there either. So
Right.
I just,
Yeah, they'd have to dig it up.
I don't think there's any real reason to do that.
I mean, that's not a huge concern. It was just a question for knowledge piece, basically. That's all I have, Mr. Mahoney.
Is that Main Street Barbers, are they still in business? It almost looks like that sign's on the other side of that fence.
Yeah, I don't believe so.
I mean, were they in this building? They were.
It's been several years. The sign just never, that's just a Google picture that we took so you could see where the existing monument sign was. That's not been, it wasn't changed from the previous owner either.
So the owner of the property, will they be responsible for removing that since it's out of compliance with ordinance and there's really nothing it's being used for, correct? How does that work?
Not that I'm aware of, but that would be the desire of the board, as Ms. Johnson is not the property owner either. But she has authorization to speak on behalf with Mr. Harrell, but she would not be able to agree to take the sign down without it being a desire of the board.
Anybody else have any more comments?
So do we have to make a motion on that other sign, or can that just stay as it is for the owner of the building to take care of?
I believe since we're discussing signs on this premises, that can be a condition of any waiver approval. Since we're asking for this premises to have a second sign that benefits the landlord as much as does the tenant. So, and I don't know why that sign should stay. It's out of compliance, and the 7-year contract is expired, and they were supposed to take it down 5 years ago.
So maybe it's like a complaint has to be lodged with the ordinance department, and they have to go knock on the door of the owner of the property to say the sign's out of compliance, you have to remove it. I don't know if it should be her job to do that.
Well, if it's part of our contingency or our motion, it's not up to her. It's up to the conveyance of the message would be to the property owner, say this has to be removed so your tenant can move forward with her sign. So, that'd be
Anybody care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we approve the sign for 5802-020-102-05 at 8400 Secor Road, Lambertville, Michigan, 48144. That a 1-foot height waiver and a permit for unique wood pole standing monument sign. That there will be no wall sign is being proposed. Does this have to be two motions then? No. Okay, and then all required permits shall be obtained from the Bedford Township. Should there be a change in use, the unique wood pole standing monument sign shall be removed. The applicant shall continue to maintain the entire perimeter landscape area of the base, no less than 2 feet wide, growing and in healthy condition. Also need to get with the owner of the building and remove the uncompliant sign in the side yard that's been out of compliance for 5 years.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Fritz seconds. Ms. Rector, can you call the roll?
Mr. Helm,
Aye.
Mr. Fritz,
Aye.
Mr. Swank,
Aye.
Mr. Steiner,
Aye.
Mr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Okay. On to item C, request for a recommendation for final site plan approval for Crown Castle Towers 06-2 LLC, Robert Clare, property owner, for a new communications tower in an agricultural zoning district located on an approximately 1.96 acre portion of parcel number 5802-002-022-00, otherwise known as 404 West Samaria, Temperance, Michigan 48182. Ms. Rector.
Yes, again, the applicant is Crown Castle Towers 06-2 LLC, 2000 Corporate Drive, Cannonsburg, Pennsylvania 15317. Property owner is Robert Clare, 404 West Samaria, Temperance, Michigan. The property is zoned agricultural, and the proposed use is for a cellular tower on parcel number 5802-002-02200, an 80-acre parcel with a proposed 1.96 area located on the north side of Samaria Road, east of Lewis Avenue, south of Raup Road. This is a request to construct a new telecommunications tower subject to section 419.18, uses not otherwise included within a specific use district, which requires a review and recommendation from the Planning Commission before a public hearing, review, and determination from the Township Board. The proposed location is on parcel number 5802-002-02200, located on the northernmost parcel owned by Mr. Clare, otherwise known as 404 West Samaria, Temperance, Michigan 48182. The proposed parcel is on the north side of Samaria Road, east of Lewis Avenue, on approximately 80-acre parcel with an existing home which meets the location requirements of the ordinance. As shown on the site plan, a proposed leased area of 100 by 100 where a new 220-foot monopole telecommunications tower with a 5-foot tall lighting rod over 225 feet in height to include a 99-foot by 99-foot fenced compound area, new power and telephone services as shown, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and Dish Network, and a new utility H-frame utilizing approximately 1.96 acres. The proposed access drive will be located on the west side of the property, approximately 2,300 feet in length off of West Samaria Road. There is a 30-foot wide access easement with a 15-foot wide gravel access driveway. Per section 419.18.21, adequate access road. An adequate access road for ingress, egress, and emergency vehicles must be provided in accordance with requirements of the Township Board or other reviewing agencies. Access off West Samaria from the Monroe County Road Commission and drive by both the Fire Department and the Township Board. As noted, there is a proposed 10-foot wide landscaping buffer to include 2 rows of evergreen trees located outside the fenced-in area, which meets the intent of the ordinance. It should be verified by the applicant on the height of the trees at planting. Ordinance requires a minimum of 4 feet, and it can only be waived by the Township Board. Per section 419-1824, screening and fencing, the actual site of the tower or antenna, including the area where building may be located, must be fenced in no less than 6 foot high with a security fence. All buildings must be located within the fenced area, and the fence must be equipped with an appropriate anti-climbing device. The proposed fencing is shown on page SP-4 of the site plan indicates the fence will be 6 feet in height with an additional 12-inch of barbed wire. Per section 419-1816, no trespass signs. The trespass signs of size, character, color, and amount prescribed by the Township Board or other reviewing agencies must be placed at the site of the tower or antenna. As shown on page SP-4 of the site plan indicates there will be 1 sign installed on the fence. Per section 419-1817, telephone posted on page SP-4, a marking ID sign is shown to be installed on the fencing. As noted on the site plan, there is an existing telecommunications tower located on parcel 5802-002-01100, otherwise known as 10910 Lewis Avenue, to be removed and the disturbed area to be restored to similar conditions as surrounding area. Planning Department was informed by the applicant the existing equipment will be removed and installed on the new proposed tower. The applicant is working with the Building Department on moving forward to remove the existing tower, and once a recommendation is made by the Planning Commission, a public hearing will be scheduled for review and a decision from the Township Board. As indicated by the applicant, the intent is to construct the new tower before demolishing the existing tower to avoid any interruption in service. Per section 419-1825, bond, the Planning Commission may desire to include in any motion that the Township Board require a bond to ensure the construction of the access drive and for other construction requirements and to ensure removal of the tower or antenna. Mencken Smith approved with comments on 10/14/2022. Monroe County Drain Commission approved with comments on 9/29/2022. Monroe County Drain Commission in regards to soil erosion and sedimentation control approved with comments on 9/30/2022. Bedford Township Fire Department approved with comments on 10/17/2022. And the Monroe County Road Commission approved with comments on 10/18/2022. Any recommendation should include that the applicant shall obtain final site plan approvals from Mencken Smith, the Road Commission, the Drain Commission in regards to soil erosion and sedimentation control, and the Bedford Township Fire Department. By ordinance, state and federal requirements, building codes and safety standards, ANSI, TIA, and Michigan Building Code requirements. And any and all conditions determined by the Planning Commission shall be addressed before the public hearing is scheduled for review and a determination from the Township Board.
Is there representation from the applicant? State your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Eric Cole. I am from 3008 Gentle Breezes Lane, Raleigh, North Carolina. And I am the agent for Crown Castle,
Came a
as
long
well
way.
as the engineer of record.
Came a long way.
I did. Actually, I grew up, believe it or not too far from here in Tecumseh, Michigan.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so I actually took a little tour down there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great time of year. Are we voting on anything tonight or just coming up with a recommendation?
You are making a recommendation to the Township Board by reviewing the language of the ordinance, and any recommendation should include any of your comments because the Township Board will be the final decision on this. It is scheduled for a public hearing.
So we are 2 board members short tonight. Do you want us to proceed?
Please.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any comments?
I have a question.
Mr. Schenk.
What is the purpose? Why are we tearing down the old tower, building a new one? Why do we need to do that?
So that's a great question. And the reason is because Crown Castle had a long-standing lease of 30 years, 25 to 30 years with the current landowner. They were unable to come to terms, and so now they're looking to relocate onto the adjacent property.
So this is a different landowner.
It is.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So if you all have any questions at all, Ms. Rector kind of mentioned to me, I've been doing this for 25 years, been to numerous public hearings. So if you all have any questions about towers, communications in general, I might be able to answer any of those questions you might have.
What improvement will there be from the old tower to this one?
So probably the main improvement you're going to see is, number one, we're going to be going from a self-supported tower, which is, that 3-legged, monstrosity, to a nice clean pole. which will make it a little bit more visually appealing, less noticeable on the horizon for future, for future generations. This pole will also be designed for more future tenants. Right now, there's 4, major carriers. However, there's numerous broadband as well as other, agencies that like to seek higher objects to put antennas and things on. So this will give you more capacity for future growth within that specific structure.
Was this one the same height as the old tower?
It is actually going to be, it's approximately the same height. It will be a little bit taller. I think the current tower is like 220 feet. So this one will be about 5 foot higher or so.
Because the lighting rod. Okay.
Correct.
If I can ask Jody, it mentions a possibility of a bond. How would we go about that? What kind of, how do we go about something like that? Or Mr. Camperth?
A bond, if I could maybe ask Mr. Cole a couple questions, Mr. Chairman.
By all means.
How long is this lease for and the expected life of the tower or the pole?
So typically, and we have we do have the owner in the back, and he can speak much more in terms of the lease conditions. But typically, they try to do at least a 20-year lease with 2 5-year extensions. So typically, they do it for 30 years. The life of the pole, I've been doing towers forever. There's towers that have been around since the 60s that are still active in very good maintenance condition. So the life of the tower can be, nearly forever, with proper maintenance. It is a steel structure, so it'll, obviously corrode over time, but, we have ways to retrade it, regalvanize it to extend the life.
Well, one of the concerns of the township and perhaps the property owner is when this tower or pole is no longer in use or it becomes obsolete through technology, what have you, or the lease just expires, what assurances are there that this will be demoed properly? And I don't know what the terms of the lease, they're typically to 24 to 36 inches below grade, removing foundations and restoring the earth to its prior condition with some limitations. So what the ordinance provides is that there will be some form of assurance, monetary bonding, letters of credit, or something else. And so I am a little bit curious as to what your experience is with providing those kinds of assurances for proper demolition, knowing that it could be 30 years from now.
So you're about to see a good example of that coming up in the very near future as they terminate this current lease with the existing property owner, in which case they then will exercise the entire lease, which requires them to demolish the existing tower and bring it back to the current conditions.
Well, one of the concerns is Crown Castle, for example, I don't think constructed that existing tower. They were a successor in ownership, and maybe it's been owned by a number of companies or subsidiaries, and it's easy for properties like this that become obsolete, and I'm just talking about hypotheticals. We see this in solar panels and other structural improvements around, where it's easy for these companies to assign them to a subsidiary or sell them to a shell company that no longer has assets and the ability to or intent to properly demo and restore the property. So that is the reason why communities require some kind of financial assurances to make sure that the road and all its gravel and the utilities that are in the ground and the foundations and the monopole are properly removed. And the problem is 30 years from now, I don't know what kind of financial assurances can be provided or is typically provided. You're probably involved in many poles and towers going up, and these communities, I'm sure, ask these questions or require this from Crown Castle.
So typically in other jurisdictions, they will build into the approval as part of one of the conditions that in the future you will remove the tower. And they even go so far as to say if you get down to the point where there are no carriers on the tower, you're going to remove the tower. I mean, there's no reason in having a tower that's up with nothing on it. It's just an eyesore. So I have seen that in many jurisdictions. Even in some of the more urban ones, where space is a premium, and even in some of those, usually they don't have any kind of monetary requirements, but they will build it into the, the zoning, and then, go down the whole condemning and all that other good stuff in order to get some of that stuff removed. Like I said, I've been doing telecommunications since 1997, and I thought it was going to be a quick buzz craze, and we're done, and we're now coming up onto 5G. I mean, I went through the first iteration when we were analog phones, and then you went to the digital age, and I will tell you that it's going to keep going for some time. And actually what we're seeing now is, as you go to the quote-unquote 5G, we're actually finding that we're now requiring more towers, just not as high. So as you continue to develop, as Monroe grows and some of the other, bigger cities in here, what you'll start seeing is the use of telephone poles and other structures to complement these existing towers. And the towers actually serve as a hub, if you will, for all of the data that's going through, and then that can convert it to a fiber line on the ground and, get trunked wherever. So as we continue forward, the what we call a macro site, which is the large towers like this one, are actually serving a purpose now of almost like the old data centers and communication centers you used to have with the big Verizons, AT&Ts, et cetera.
Can you give us an example of an assurance you gave a community that was concerned about future demolition?
Yeah, so let's see an example in I recently did a project in Hanover County, Virginia, which they have an ordinance that basically the same thing, and built into your quote unquote final site plan approval, there's all the conditions, and they'll have conditions such as you've got to maintain the landscaping, for example. There will be conditions where, because I mean, everybody will put in the landscaping, looks beautiful for, the first year, 2 years, but then after that, it can just die out, and then at that point, it's just a fence.
I meant, I guess to be more specific, something more than your word that will do it when we decide to retire the tower.
Most of them, like I said, are basically just built into the conditions of the approval. So it's one of those conditions that's outlined that, if you get to the point where there are no carriers, it's no longer in use, you are required to demo it, and that's just one of the conditions of the approval. And at that point, I have not personally seen any that have actually gotten to that point yet. Most of the towers nowadays are owned by 4 different companies. So the AT&Ts of the world, Verizons of the world, Sprints of the world, they go in and out of tower ownership. And so over the years, what has happened is all these larger, what they call vertical real estate companies now, Crown Castle, American Tower, SBA, and a company called Vertical Bridge, are basically now these large real estate companies, listed on the Security Exchange Commission and all that other good stuff, that basically are buying all these assets and then marketing it out there for carriers. And as I said, nowadays we're actually getting to the point with the new digital 5G where we used to design these things to have a approximate 2-mile radius was typically what you would design for, the cellular coverage. And what's happening now is that footprint is starting to shrink, meaning you need more to fill in some of these gaps for everybody to have their, gigabyte downloads and everything else. So like I said, I don't see an issue where you should be concerned necessarily about the towers having to come down, but having some, thought in the future of where else can you put some of these as your county continues to grow, build, expand.
Mr. Shank.
Okay, so let's go to the one you're going to tear down now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're going to take that one out. What are you going to do to, what's it going to look like when it's done? Is it just going to be a big hole in the ground, or is it going to be brought back to some kind of standard?
No, it'll basically be brought back to the way it was before. So it was farm field before, so we will restore it back to the farmland where the current owner can then continue to farm it as he does the rest of his property. So we'll basically take everything down within the compound. Now, whether or not the road comes out, that's going to be a negotiation between the landlord and Crown Castle, because it may actually benefit him to keep the road in place to be able to access his property. So I don't want to go so far as to say that the road's definitely going to come out, but if he so decides he wants to farm that road as well, then we'll restore that to the existing condition as well.
Will the underground utilities and conduits running from Lewis Avenue to that tower be removed?
That I can't say because the power company has their own easement. So whether or not the power company decides they're going to do something different, they will usually start with the existing easement that Crown Castle, we currently are looking at having a 30-foot easement for access and utilities. But a lot of times the utility company then will come in and put in their own easements. Again, for this very reason, that if you change, you move away, they're not caught holding the bag for, a bunch of power they've run. So they may decide to do that. What I think is probably going to happen, if I were a betting person, is they will simply extend the service into Mr. Clare's property as opposed to running it all the way up the other access road. But I can't say for sure how the power company will want to do that, because they have a transformer that's actually set in the back corner. They have another one that's over by the compound itself, but they have one that's actually in the back corner of both properties, and so they may just decide to extend that one into the adjacent area.
If the township board approves this in the end, what kind of time frame are you talking about building the new tower and then demoing the old one?
It's funny you should say that. We are kind of under the gun, which is why we've been pushing Miss Rector as hard as we possibly can. Our lease is going to expire the 23rd of February, and the 23rd of February, that tower has to go dark. We have to remove it, whether or not we have the new tower in place. So our goal is to have the tower in place by 23 February with all the carriers currently on it.
And how will it be in the middle of winter remediating the property?
I'm sorry, say again?
What will it be like in the middle of winter remediating the property or getting it back to its natural state?
That may actually be done in stages, and that'll depend. I mean, obviously, based on the lease terms, the current owner is going to have to say, yes, I agree, that is brought back to the natural state. So there may be some additional work that has to go on into the spring. But the long story short is we have to demo that tower as soon as that lease ends.
And if we don't, a portion of the township's going to be without service.
Yes, sir. That unfortunately is again one of the big reasons we're pushing so hard, is to ensure there is no loss of service for the residents.
What are the four carriers again? I know it's in here, but
So we've got AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and Dish.
Where will your new easement actually run from? Will it run from Samaria Road?
Yes, sir.
To the north?
I actually went out there today and staked out the commercial. We're going to have a modified commercial driveway, which is about an 18-foot concrete apron. I'm sorry, it's actually going to be asphalt. They preferred asphalt versus concrete. So it's going to be a 18-foot wide asphalt apron that will lead into the 15-foot gravel drive. And basically that'll run all the way up the property line, more or less, of Mr. Clare's property and the two adjacent properties.
And from the township level, I know that the monopoles have been, all the latest and greatest have been approved. Obviously, from a fall zone, you don't really have much of an issue with a fall zone, but again, the monopole designed to come down if it did.
So basically the design is it doesn't drop straight down quite like that. Being a structural engineer, I can kind of describe that, but the goal is basically it'll fold over on itself.
Yeah, they could collapse down this way.
Correct. So it will stay within, our primary focus is it'll stay within that compound.
Right, it's not a full 200 and some feet out.
No, sir.
Right.
No, sir.
Like the old poles, or towers, I should say. So going back to what Mr. Camprath was asked, lease agreements, approvals, your site plan, everything, condition this, condition that, those are all, well said. But to Mr. Camprath, the bond portion, what would you recommend if that was the case to approve, X value of a bond, how large, how many $1,000 bond, and again, because what if the main companies, they just go bankrupt, they're gone, there's not a penny there, and then we've got this tower there, somebody's got to demo it, and then it leaves the owner holding the bag, but then it's also non-compliant with township ordinance and zoning, so it sort of leaves township, even though it's not our contract directly, it sort of leaves the township holding the bag as well, because we're going to tell that property owner, hey, this isn't in compliance, this got to come down. So there's got to be some assurities to the township and to the property owner there. And again, that goes to what I'm saying, the value of the bond. I don't know where to start there, Mr. Camprath.
While you're pondering that, I might throw in like a time frame too, to remove a non-used pole, monopole, whatever they call them, within a reasonable amount of time too as well.
I don't know as if we're going to get any information from the applicant on this, but it would be my guess that the cost to rehab and remove could be between $200,000 and $400,000 to rehabilitate a site.
And that's in today's dollars, and we're talking 30 years down the road.
That's right. And so, the applicable section of the ordinance is subsection 25. I think the planning department highlighted that. And it says that the township board may require a bond to ensure construction of the access drive and for other construction requirements and or to ensure removal of the tower antenna. So that's something that the township board ultimately will determine. I'm sure they would appreciate a recommendation from the planning commission. Whether it's a bank line of credit, maybe that's something more practical, because a surety bond or a performance bond, generally they don't, in my experience, maybe I'm wrong, don't run more than 5 years. I mean, those are more common for construction projects, road projects, or utility improvements to make sure they get completed by a contractor. And if the contractor fails, then the municipality can come in, take the surety money, and finish the project for the benefit of the public. So I don't know how applicable that is.
And obviously, with their timeline that they're talking about, the tower demolition itself is obviously pretty short timeline, because if they've got to have that tower down by end of February, close to the end of February, that's 4 months from now. And they're not planning on demoing that until the new one's built. So they've got a really compressed time frame. So I'm guessing that the tower itself, they could probably have that down in a week or two, but it's the land restoration that's going to take that extra time.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
So I guess, again, fast forward 25, 30 years to a new pole, you're going to have probably the similar type of time frame. It might take, 2, 3, 4 weeks to tear it down. And then, again, depending on what the property owner has agreed to, besides bringing it back to the current farmland, and if they have the driveway and things like that included, that's up to them, how they've agreed any kind of remediation once that tower would come down at some point. So, and being the township board liaison, I think it's wise that this body gives me something to go on and convey directly to the township board, even though this is the recommending body. If if you're going to recommend doing anything and taking the lead from Mr. Camperth, whether we do a bond, a line of credit, or whatever, that needs to be something that I can carry forward to the township board to explain it well if the board chooses to go forward with this.
Mr. Shank, please.
I think it's very possible to put some kind of constraints on removing the old one and the requirements in a bond or however we choose to do it. I don't see any way it's enforceable at all for 30 years down the road. You know, other than having it recommending to the landowner to have that in your contract. That whenever this does happen, that they've got to bring it back to the way it was, just like they're doing on the current one. Because I don't see how we can carry a bond or even a line of credit, because like you said, the companies won't be here 30 years from now. It's going to be a different entity.
What have you budgeted for removing the existing tower?
So what I provided this morning for the demo permit was about $350K. Each of the carriers will take care of their own equipment. The only thing that will be left standing from their standpoint will be their slabs that their shelters and equipment sitting on. So that'll be removed down to, a couple feet below grade once the Crown Castle contractor gets in there. And they will remove all of the grounding and that kind of stuff as well. They'll just kind of rip all that stuff up out of the ground, the utilities within the compound. Everything up to where the power company takes over, which is their transformers, or they also have some telecommunication lines that are running above ground as well along that access road, so that'll be taken care of by whoever is the telecommunication company providing that line.
Mr. Camperth?
Will you personally or your department be involved in the demo of the existing tower?
I personally am an engineer and one of their designers, so I won't, but Crown Castle has assigned a project manager, and he will be responsible for both the demo as well as the construction of the new site.
And can you provide that contact information to the planning department?
I absolutely can. He was actually on vacation the last couple of weeks, so otherwise, and he may actually come to the township board meeting as well.
I guess from a practical standpoint, I don't know how easy it is for you to write a check for $350,000 that we can stick in an escrow account and hold it for 30 years. And at today's interest rates, that might be $400,000 in 30 years.
Well, Mr. Mahoney, if you think about it, and he said there's 4 companies there, that's about $85, $90K a piece. I paid half that last year for my phone bill, so they'll have that paid in a week.
Did you see his jaw drop?
So, yeah, I mean, again, the bond line of credit, it's going to just go just so far. I guess on the other hand, I don't see it happening, but if, let's just say they started to do the work, tear down, and all of a sudden something happens and they stop, I guess from a bond standpoint up front for the initial phase, but long term, I just don't know how you tie that in, like say, 20 years from now, 30,
And I have not seen any jurisdictions in the, I've probably been to 50 to 100 public hearings for new towers, and nobody has got that type of ability, again, like you were saying, just to maintain that bond or whatever. Again, they just build it in there, and if they have to condemn it, they condemn it.
Mr. Fritz?
Yes. What's written in the contract now that you're taking that one down? Nothing. You're just doing it as that's the next step.
No, sir. It is actually written in the lease.
That you will be responsible for taking it down.
Yes, sir. The Crown Castle is responsible upon the end of the termination of the lease.
And that lease is between you and the landowner.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And like I said, Mr. Clare will have similar language within his lease for the new tower.
Well, in our language, it should definitely be Crown Castle Towers and its successors, plural.
I believe that's exactly what it says, because as was alluded to earlier, Global Signal was the original tower owner for this particular tower, and Crown Castle bought up all the Global Signal assets. So they then, by default, became. So if you look at some of the underlying documents for the original lease for the existing tower, a lot of it's in Global Signal name.
How many towers do they own?
Oh gosh, they're an international company, so I want to say hundreds of thousands.
Annual sales? I'm just wondering how much is 350,000 to them.
350,000 is a drop in the bucket. I mean, they're, a multi-$100 billion company. I mean, like I said, they're on the security S&P 500 under Crown Castle Towers.
If I may.
Yeah, Mr. Shank.
If it's already in their existing lease contract for the old tower that you have to do this, is it really necessary for us to do a bond or some kind of thing like that?
I would say no, but I might be prejudiced.
Actually, I'm kind of addressing the rest of the board and Mr. Camperth and Jody here, so.
Yeah, you can go ahead if you're
We're
speaking
both
on
good.
behalf of the applicant.
Oh.
I'm sorry?
You're speaking on behalf of the applicant?
I'm speaking the current landowner that owns the land underneath the existing tower. I've been standing here kind of listening to this.
Ms. Director?
I'm sorry. I was going to comment first to Mr. Swank's comment from the ordinance standpoint, and then I'll let Mr. Camprath answer it from the legal standpoint. By ordinance, keep in mind when you look under goals in the language of number 2, the tower request to be torn down, it does state that strongly encourages the joint use of new and existing towers and antenna sites as a primary option rather than construction of additional single-use towers and antennas, and encourages use of towers and antennas to locate them to the extent possible in areas where its adverse impact on the community is minimal. So I think that is the applicant's response of tearing down the existing tower is because they're putting one exactly to an adjacent abutting property next door. So by ordinance, we encourage them to be in locations of the township, to not encourage them to be all in one location, because we are very specific. If you read wireless towers, they are only permitted in I-1, I-2, I-3 districts and in ag districts north of Erie Road, on township-owned land, and on land and or facilities such as water towers owned by the township or South County water system, and on existing towers and antennas on the Bedford school property. The only places of location that you can have in telecommunications towers. So from an ordinance standpoint, I believe that not only by the lease, but by ordinance, we would not encourage one to be on the property and constructed directly next door. And then I'll let Mr. Camprath add anything to the contrary.
No, obviously, we don't want 2 towers on adjacent properties. We want to maximize the efficiency and use of a singular tower to the best we can.
But it makes sense, or from a performance standpoint, for them to build a new one and then tear down the old one. And that's the plan.
Yes, sir. We don't want loss of service for the residents. That's the biggest goal.
So as much as I'm curious to hear what he has to say, is this the appropriate time if
I was going to say, did you have any more questions for me?
we may?
Okay, I'll sit over here. I'll sit up front.
This is not a public hearing.
He can make comments at the end.
Yes, at public comment.
Okay. Anybody have any more questions for Mr. Cole? I guess when you put things in the light of the size of this company and the 350,000 is probably less than a drop in the bucket to them, I guess we would have legal recourse if they don't live up to the terms of their contract and remove a tower when they're supposed to remove it. Is there concern there, Mr. Camper?
No, I don't think that we can disparage or doubt what Crown Castle's intent would be. It's just, who are we going to be dealing with, if anybody, in 30 years?
So maybe that might be something to be written in if they do decide to sell this tower, or if they're bought out by somebody, they have to come here for permission to renew a contract.
Well, I think the approval runs with the land. It's not as though if we don't like their successor that we can tell them to take the tower down.
Just concerned about financial viability.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's an easy answer to this question. And maybe there's no answer to it. And because of the length of time that this will be here, and to some degree, I guess, you cross your fingers.
That tower is going to have to go someplace, and you're going to run into the same long-term issues regardless of where they choose.
And I think you mentioned earlier, there are signs and there are successors. I mean, you know, that's going to be part of anybody's contract. I mean, obviously, if they did sell it tomorrow after they got started, whoever buys it, they're going to have to follow all the ordinances, all the rules, regulations that these guys have to follow, Crown Castle's got to follow to begin with. As Mr. Camper said, of course, it runs with the land. So, and if the owner of the property sells the land, whoever buys it has to know right up front. They should be getting a copy of that same contract, knowing what they're getting in for as well.
Are the landowners ultimately responsible for anything? Non-performance of the rental agreement or lease agreement they have with these companies?
Well, we don't know what the lease agreement obligations are between the parties. I'm sure there's some obligations not to interfere with the use of the tenant of the property, things like that. As far as the landlord agreeing to demolish the improvements, it's probably not in the lease. The tenant, I'm sure, agrees to do that. It just comes down to a practical enforcement impossibility. It's just something that's possible. Not saying it would ever happen. But that's why we require surety bonds for other types of construction projects, but none that last this long.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Rector?
I just wanted to make sure we get clarification if the applicant regarding the plantings of the landscaping, that they must be 4 feet. Just because in my information to the Township Board, I would like to make sure I have some clarification if they are going to waiver from the 4-foot requirement. Only the Township Board can authorize it, but I would like to include as much information from this meeting to move forward. And also keep in mind that no permits for moving forward, and the applicant is representative is aware that until all the comments of absolute approval are approved by the reviewing agencies, can the demo permit be issued or a permit to continue to move forward with construction. So they are aware of that. We're just trying to keep the project moving forward. I do believe some of these comments that are in the reviewing letters from this memo tonight have been addressed, and I believe the applicant is working hard to get those addressed. It is scheduled for the public hearing at the Township Board on the November 15th meeting. I wanted to make sure I make that notified if anybody is watching this meeting, that it will go to the Township Board on November 15th for a public hearing. It will publish on Monday, October 31st in the paper. So if there's any questions, that they have that time frame to reach out to the Planning Department or the applicant.
So in language, we'll use successors, and then you said 4-foot landscaping to start, minimum height.
Minimum is 4 feet, and if they desire anything less, it would have to be approved by the Township Board. But I would like some type of clarification from tonight's meeting with the applicant to give the Township Board direction on what things have to be clarified as well.
Do you have problems with minimum 4-foot plantings around?
No. We called one of the local landscaping companies, and they gave us, I want to say it was probably a 5 to 6 foot base, and then it was only going to grow from there.
So
Evergreen.
that's acceptable then with the current language. Okay. Mr. Fritz?
Just to the board and to Jody also, the problem we had before was that they had 6-foot trees, but they cut them up 3 foot off of the. Are we going to try to start writing something in there that they don't do that anymore to stop them from, destroying the bottom half of the boundary?
If the trees become dead or not maintained, they should be replaced. However, in that case scenario, it was a contract agreement with the township, and this is a contract agreement with the landowner. If there is a complaint of the trees not providing a buffer, then the ordinance department would go out and explain that to the property owner. Then he would have to contact Crown Castle as the leased area.
I didn't know if we wanted to start including that in our request.
That would be the desire of the board.
Well, the word maintained would that cover it?
All it says here is a 4-foot high.
Must be maintained. That cover it?
And that doesn't do the blocking of the view.
I think those guys wanted to have people see their business.
Okay. Okay.
Typically, the only time we actually will start actually trimming trees is when they get to be so tall that they might drop branches within the compound itself. Otherwise, we have no problem with a 40-foot high growth tree as long as it's, again, not going to cause any harm to the equipment, which would result in a loss of service to customers.
What other language should we recommend to the township board?
Please include all the language that I included in the memo, and also in the first section of the ordinance of supporting of why you would recommend to either approve or deny, and I do have that highlighted in section 419.18. If you recommend that portion of the ordinance for the special approval portion of the ordinance. If you so find that those comply.
Let me start by just asking, why would we not approve this recommend this to the township board? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Mr. Camper's got his hand.
Well, Mr. Camper.
Well, I don't have a specific answer to your question, but if you look at the conditions that the township board has to find in order to approve a special approval like this, it's on page 2210 of the ordinance, it's section 400.1918, and Jody has it all highlighted in the middle of that page in yellow. Those are all the findings that you can advise the township board exist or don't exist, and there would be reasons then that you wouldn't approve it. For example, is not compatible with already existing uses in the area, would interfere with orderly development of the area, would be concerned about traffic or concerned about public facilities. So all of these findings should be included in the motion as not being contrary to the township and therefore approving, or that would be a reason for recommending denial because you found that this project is contrary to those things. So there's a basis for the reasoning that you're looking for.
And that old tower has been there how long? 1997. So we're moving it over one property, and it hasn't caused any problems or hardships for anybody that I'm aware of?
And Mr. Mahoney, that 400.1918, to Mr. Camper's point, I mean, I think we list 400.1918 and all of its subsections and parts thereof, I think. I mean, because obviously on Ms. Rector's narrative, she pinpoints them, like .34, .24, 16, et cetera, but all that will be covered in its entirety of 400.1918. So I think if we stated that, and then again, the only variance would be, I shouldn't use the word variance, but the only difference would be that if there was a desire to have any kind of bond or a surety or credit, whatever, I don't know how you do it, but that would be the 400.1918.25. And again, it's not a mandatory thing. It's just that's the mechanism that the ordinance provides for that. And then, of course, all the recommendations of all the agencies.
Does anybody have any comments regarding the bond? Should we require one? Should we just put it into the contract that they have to abide by?
I think our biggest thing is there's no, I mean, all the comments I've heard from the applicant, I've heard from the board members, legal, et cetera, there's been no real clear definition of how we would even go about that bond in such a long-term type agreement. Like I said, unless, but the only thing I can think of is if you want to do any kind of bond up front where they start the project and tomorrow they go bankrupt, which not going to happen, but, maybe a small bond for that portion that they follow through with their project. But again, that's also part of the landowner's agreement too, that they've got to deal with that. So again, it may be a moot point.
Like I said, there has to be a cell tower. Mr. Helm?
Well, when they approved this 25 years ago or whatever, was there a bond at that point to protect to today's, not what we're doing now?
There's no bond in existence right now, correct?
I just don't think how you just can't.
It's the way it's done.
No. No one knows the cost of what it'll be. $3 million then.
I mean, obviously 30 years from now, the landowner might have to sue somebody to get it done. I mean, unfortunately.
Mr. Shea?
My only thought is the only performance bond that would then be reasonable would be one for him to take care of the current landowner to make sure it's brought up to where it's supposed to be. There's no way to enforce 30 years from now.
Right.
But a performance bond for the old landowner, I think, is possible if we think it's necessary.
But I don't know if we can do that because we're not privy to that contract.
Yeah, that probably is not before this body tonight, or that's just not a question before us dealing with the existing tower. That approval has been approved more than 25, 30 years ago.
Okay.
Right.
So it doesn't seem like having or requiring a bond is practical. Would everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So that settles that subject. Is there any other language we want to make sure gets included in our recommendation? Everybody's comfortable with the road design? You'll create a new road on this new property access?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And part of the conditions, and I'm not sure how to meet that, because we've got basically the goal is we have to build the access road before we do anything with the tower, and that's the condition from the fire marshal, and it makes perfect sense from a safety standpoint. So I don't know how I'm going to get rid of that condition before construction, but Ms. Rector might be able to help me out with some of the language.
So we want to make sure we include successors and that the landscape plantings start at the minimum 4 foot and are maintained. Anything else, guys? Mr. Steiner?
There is one thing. Obviously, once they get started, they're not going to be putting trees in anytime soon. So you may need to add that, they have to complete that by spring time frame, April, something like that. Because, obviously they're not going to put a tree in that they're going to be tearing back out in the spring and saying it's already dead.
April 30, a good time frame.
I think April 30 is probably, pretty good to have your landscape done.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else, gentlemen? Got landscaping, bond, discussion. Okay, so there's basically 2 items we want to make sure is included in any agreement that we recommend to the Township Board. Ms. Rector, anything else we should cover? Anything we've missed?
Also, you're also including about it has to meet all the requirements of the 400 point 1918.
Okay. Do we do this in, go ahead, Ms. Rector.
I just want to say when you notate section 419.18, notate it as the language that's highlighted and that it's for a new tower, because in the language of 419.18, it does for administratively approvals. There is a list of different uses for existing towers as well. So just as for section 2 of a new tower.
Okay, and how are we going to present this to the township board?
I will supply an analysis of tonight's meeting. We will include the minutes from tonight's meeting. I include the entire packet that was provided to the Planning Commission, and in the memo I break down all of the notations that I put in the memo in your analysis and any additional information. I include exactly what your motion is going to be. We will, of course, stamp the minutes unofficial because it will not come back to you for approval before my deadline to get it on to the Township Board. And then they will receive the same packet information showing the site plan as submitted for a recommendation. And of course, if there are any additional comments, I will include that. The applicant is required to be actually at that meeting as well. And that is a public hearing, and any public comment at that time will be heard by the Township Board.
And Mr. Mahoney, the other thing too, I'll do a refresher with Ms. Rector prior to the Township Board meeting so I can be sure that I am covering exactly what, I mean, I've got a pretty good memory still, but to cover exactly what the intent of this body is, so I make sure that I've got all the T's crossed, all the I's dotted when I convey this board's message to the Township Board.
And I will second that, because anything that comes to the Planning Commission that is the Township Board's representative, that is the intent for them to have that information ready available. And Mr. Steiner and I work very well to make sure we're both on board of what's being presented to the Township Board.
Okay, great. So we don't have a motion or anything. You're just going to communicate what we've
Yes,
discussed.
you need a motion tonight with your recommendation whether to approve or deny to the Township Board.
Okay, is there a motion on the floor?
Well, Mr. Mahoney, I know you were taking some good notes as well. Fred, you were taking some, I'm sure. Brad and Ron. I'm going to go ahead and get started and just make sure that you follow and cover anything that I might have missed. My recommendation is to approve the final site plan for Crown Castle Towers LLC, 2000 Corporate Drive, Cannonsburg, Pennsylvania, on property 58-02-002-022-00, which is an 80-acre parcel and proposed 1.96 acre area located on the north side of Samaria Road, east side of Lewis, south of Rock Road, otherwise known as 404 West Samaria. Per their request, the approval would be to construct a new telecommunications tower subject to Bedford Township Ordinance, Section 400.1918, and all of its subsections, but primarily the highlighted sections that have been provided by the Planning Department to this committee for our review. The section 419.18.21 providing for the adequate access road must be provided. Their landscape buffer, which has been discussed, has to have evergreen trees, 2 rows located outside the fenced area that meets the intent of the ordinance, 419.18.34. The trees must be at least 4 foot in height. The applicant has stated probably somewhere between 4 and 6 feet. Even though it's in the ordinance, I do want to mention the subsections .24, screening and fencing, .16, no trespass signs, .17, telephone number posted. Those are very important, so I figured I'm going to call those out, even though it's already in the ordinance 400.1918. Per section 400.1918.25, the Planning Commission may desire to include that the Township Board require a bond. This body has found that is, at this time, not really applicable to this type situation, being that this is going to have a somewhere between a 20 to 30 year longevity of a contract with the property owner. This is also subject to all the approvals as follows. The Manic Smith Group, they have approved with comments that must be satisfied. The Monroe County Drain Commission has approved with comments that must be satisfied. The Monroe County Drain Commission in regard to soil erosion and sedimentation control has been approved with comments that must be satisfied. Bedford Township Fire Department approved with comments that must be satisfied. Monroe County Road Commission has approved with comments that must be satisfied. The final site plan must be provided by the applicant and receive all the final site plan approvals from those agencies that I just mentioned: Manic Smith Group, Monroe County Road Commission, Monroe County Drain Commission, and Monroe County Drain Commission in regards to soil erosion and sedimentation control. Must follow all state and federal regulations and requirements and building codes and safety standards, ANSI, TIA, and Michigan Building Code requirements, and noted in all of our ordinances, and any and all conditions determined by this planning department that have been addressed this evening must be part of the recommendation.
And contract between the Township, Crown Castle Towers, and any and all successors.
We don't have a contract with them. We will have a site plan approval.
I'm talking about, we're putting language together for the Township Board.
But we don't have a contract. We can mention that it has to be part of their contract with the landowner.
Okay.
But we don't have a contract. So we need a second and a friendly amendment to do that probably. So
Okay.
if you want to second it.
I'll second it.
And then your friendly amendment would be to also add to the site plan approval that within their contract, it must state that all signs and assessors.
Yes. Any and all successors. Anybody else want to add anything?
Good job. That's pretty good.
Anybody want to? Oh, we did get a second. I seconded it. So, Mr. Rector, do you want to call the roll?
Oh, Ms. Rector's got a comment.
I just had
Oh.
a comment. If the desire for request of an amendment to require the existing tower at 10910 B Lewis Avenue must be demoed, just to include it in the motion as well, to avoid conflict with the ordinance requirements of reutilizing instead of more than one tower in one area.
Correct. Even though it was stated in their request, that yes, I agree that we should add that it must be demolished, because they also have a timeline of February 23rd, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
So that needs to be part of the friendly amendment.
And if they ever cease service, that they have to remove this one. If they find, if there's another technology or reason to pull down this monopole, they are responsible for removing it, remediating the property. Okay.
Accepted.
All right. Ms. Rector, do you want to call the roll?
Did you accept that friendly amendment as well?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Steiner,
Aye.
Mr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Swank,
Aye.
Mr. Fritz,
Aye.
Mr. Helm.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Safe travels back. Okay, going on to item 8, public comment. Now, sir, if you want to speak, you can.
Kim Leonard, 1202 Samaria Road. I'm the current leaseholder of
Can you speak into the microphone?
cell tower. I guess I'm a little disappointed that you guys based a lot of decisions here on not having all the facts. A little late for now, but I think one question you have to ask yourself is why would they spend $350,000 to demo a tower, spend $500,000 to put up a new one? I don't quite get that. I've been trying for 5 years to, get them to acknowledge that their lease is running out and they need to do something. I'm not sure what all that transpired, but the biggest problem that I think you folks made a mistake is the lease expired January 31st, 2021. And the last correspondence I had was in February and say, look, your lease is expired. I don't know what you're doing, but you guys need to do something. You either got to release it or tear it down or do something. But here we are almost a year later, and they're saying it's February, and that is totally not true. I have a copy of the original check that I got back in '97. But anyway, irregardless, I feel like I'm kind of wasting my time here because you guys already made this decision. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Rector?
I'm sorry, I would just like to let Mr. Leonard know that this is a recommendation and that it will go to the Township Board on November 15th, and that will be when a decision is made on it as well. Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Gail Kane, 1056 West Temperance. I'm here tonight just because of the ordinance that was regarding noise. And I know that Jody says that she's trying to get you guys to work on these ordinances because they do need to be changed. It really is emphatic that this stuff has to get taken care of. We're doing what I call skyscraper developments, where we're taking what's in the front and throwing another house in front of a house that's already back behind because it's a large lot, and now suddenly they don't want that large lot. So we're building houses on top of houses on top of houses and lots next to each other. And it's creating issues. The noise ordinance, for one, is so busted up and broken into different parts that it can be piecemealed. And even for the police, they don't know which section to look at. So there's the basic rule that just says if a noise bothers somebody, it has to be taken care of. But in my situation that I've experienced, and it's not been with garbage trucks because I must have a dozen that go up and down my road whenever they want, is the fact that there's a 200-foot ordinance. Sorry about your luck, lady. You're in the 200-foot, but when the guy across the street comes home and the noise is bothering him, now they can respond to that. So there's some big issues with how your ordinances are written and how it impacts the way people live in this township all the way around. The other issue, I was here before, as far as the fence. That's another ordinance that needs to be looked at, evaluated. Something needs to change with that whole thing. I mean, the definition of what's a decorative fence. Again, these skyscraper lots are going to pull into these fences that are somebody else's front yard fence, but is in somebody else's backyard. So what is a decorative fence? There's no definition for that. There's some major issues. The problem comes, however, is when you have an ordinance officer who is not sticking to the rules, and he reads it one way for one person and reads it another way for another. So there's some big issues, and I'm not the only one that has voiced concerns with how the ordinance department is handling things or how they choose to interpret. So it's got to be even all the way around. So I'm really encouraging you guys. I don't know if you need to get a separate committee from the township or through planning or whatever that needs to get into these ordinances. But I know back in 2016 there had been a promise that somebody was going to be looking into these and fixing them. But the more detailed they are, the harder they are to actually enforce. So that's all I'm asking, is that we do something. So right. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Item 9, information.
I just want to make sure I give the correct date. I believe it's November 9th. Yes, tentatively, the next meeting will be November 9th. Keep in mind The next meeting, then we are tentatively looking at November 16th if items are ready, and moving the 23rd meeting to the 16th. I will keep everybody informed as soon as I have update on the meeting. I appreciate everybody getting back with me on the meeting dates that they would be able or unable to attend.
You said it looks like you have items on the 16th?
I'm going to, I won't know. I won't know till the Tuesday
Fair enough.
before, but we do have things that are close to being ready, so we may have one either the 9th or the 16th, possibly both, depending on the deadline date. We have a lot of projects that are close to being finalized, and I don't want to hold them up because tentatively looking at only one meeting in December due to the holiday, so I don't want to hold them up to continue because any comments that are in a site plan review have to be addressed before moving forward with the building permit. So we're trying to keep them moving forward as quickly as possible.
Thanks. Moving on to commission staff comment. Why don't we start with you, Ms. Director?
I have nothing. Thank you for the discussion tonight. As the tower was something new that has not been in my time before the commission, and I don't, maybe Mr. Steiner might have had one before as a longtime member of the community, but first time for me, so that's why there was more information, and I was just trying to get guidance on moving forward should we get any other in the community. So thank you.
Mr. Camper? Katrina?
I have nothing.
Mr. Helm?
I have nothing.
Mr. Fritz?
The December, if we have the December meeting, it'll be the 14th.
I believe that's correct.
The 14th. I'm sorry, I think I said the 16th, but the 14th is the Wednesday.
Anything else? No? You're good?
Good. Yep.
Yeah, it is interesting talking about these novel items that come up. It's good to learn. It's fun. So, Mr. Shank,
Nothing.
Mr. Steiner.
Yeah, the one tower, we've got one right out back here. That one was quite different because Township has a contract on it. So that one's very different because we have a lot of say in that one. The other one that came up over a number of years ago, the one that's at the school, again, different because it's a public entity, the school property, but they still had to get special approvals to get that one done as well. But I think the biggest thing, again, back here, the school getting into those monopoles and getting away from the old towers that had the full distance of the fall in case of a disaster on it. So obviously that's just about the way everybody's going, and they're probably a lot easier to maintain than the old style poles. You just got to get somebody that's willing to climb that thing straight up. That's all.
Okay, well, thank you. With that, we'll adjourn the meeting. It is 8:38. Thank you, everybody.